Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you had a really good weekend and that you're feeling rested and ready to go. I hope you have some sort of a routine in this quarantine that makes you feel a little more normal. Maybe you are going to bed at the same time every night, getting up at the same time, doing your classwork at the same time. That would probably be helpful for you to get everything done. Many of you have been emailing me questions over the last month, and that's been great. If you have had questions or you run into difficulties, be sure to communicate those with me so that way I can help you. If you're still turning in late work, it's hurting you pretty badly at this point. You can still turn it around. So make a plan for yourself and get going on that late work. Most of you are turning in your work on time and you're doing a great job getting everything turned in. And let's just encourage your friends who aren't, because they could be, having a hard time with digital learning, or just not feeling motivated when they're at home. So encourage your friends too. If you know that they're not turning in work, say, Miss Groves told me to encourage you. And then they'll laugh and maybe they'll actually go home and do an assignment. So I hope you guys are doing well. And today we're going to go ahead and dig right in. So you are underneath Monday video lesson if you're an A-Day student. And if you're a B-Day student, it says Tuesday video lesson. Number 1, take attendance for today. Pause this video right now. Go take attendance. Good job. So you paused it. Hopefully you took attendance. And now we're going to move on to step number 2. View video lesson attached. So our lesson today is called Political Cartoons, Rhetorical Analysis. So last week we didn't do anything with rhetoric because we were focused on submitting your book reviews, which have been wonderful. And if you didn't turn it in, you need to do that today. But we are going back onto our rhetorical analysis train and talking about how a good presenter can create an argument to persuade the audience to do something or to think something, or to cause some sort of political or commercial action. So buying something or voting for someone or something. So we're back into rhetorical analysis. And rhetorical analysis isn't always about written speeches or TED Talks or commercials or ads. Sometimes they can come across in articles or even in something like a cartoon, a political cartoon. Political cartoons are this whole different genre of English and history, and you do have to know how to read a political cartoon. It's trying to show you certain things in order to persuade you of something or to make you think. So today we're going to talk about how you can look at political cartoons and read them correctly and then analyze them for rhetoric. What are they trying to get you to do or get you to think? So that is our lesson for today. And we're going to be going through this slideshow, and I attached the slideshow separately for easy viewing so that way you don't have to watch this whole video again to get your lessons. So let's go ahead and click on our lesson for today. Political cartoons, rhetorical analysis. Let's hit present. All right. This lesson is broken up into 2 different days. The first day, which is today, is how to analyze a political cartoon. And the 3 pieces of that are background, what to look for, and then we're going to practice on a few cartoons together. Day 2 is completing your own political cartoon analysis. You're not making a cartoon, but I am providing you with one that we did not look at today, and then you're going to answer practice questions and respond to the political cartoon. So background, what is a political cartoon? My definition of the political cartoon and what I think that you need to know for a political cartoon is down here. Political cartoons are a way to quickly get a point across and persuade an audience, which means that a political cartoon uses rhetoric, the art of persuasion. This is how it's tied into English. We study how to read political cartoons in AP English and often in AP History so that you are able to properly decipher the purpose message of the argument inside of the political cartoon. So there is this helpful video from a cartoonist and also I think a museum curator who will help you understand a little bit more about political cartoons. My face is going to stay in the corner of this screen over here. as we're watching it, and that's okay.
Matt Worker draws cartoons for a living. Matt Worker draws cartoons for a living. He's a staff cartoonist for Politico, an American political journalism outlet just outside Washington.
We're a strange mix of things in that we are making serious commentary on serious topics, but we're doing it not so seriously, and we get to draw our opinions with silly pictures.
The Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist says the main advantage of a political cartoon is being able to communicate an opinion very quickly.
I can draw a picture and put in a little word bubble, and you can read it in about 4 seconds, and you get it. It has to hit you in the face kind of hard and fast, and you know it when you've been hit.
In this cartoon, for example, Worker was inspired by an iconic image by American artist Norman Rockwell, reflecting a traditional scene of American culture. The cartoonist says over the years, his craft has evolved.
When I started 40 years ago doing cartoons, an editorial cartoon was a black and white single panel cartoon in a newspaper. And now cartoons can be color, they can be animated, they can be graphic novels that are political.
Like this 2018 Pulitzer Prize-winning work by journalist Jake Halper and illustrator Michael Sloan, currently on display at the museum in Washington. The series tells the story of 2 Syrian families' harrowing journey from their homeland to the U.S., where they settled as refugees in 2016. Patty Rule is vice president of exhibits at the museum.
Since the beginning of this country, editorial cartoons have been framing issues and framing debate, from Ben Franklin, the Live Free or Die, the segmented snake that rallied the 13 colonies together. So it's always been a part of this country and the world's way of freely expressing ideas and debate.
But free expression sometimes comes at a heavy price. In 2015, Islamic terrorists attacked the offices of Charlie Hebdo, a French satirical magazine, after it published unflattering cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. 12 people were killed in the attack, including several prominent cartoonists.
And within their culture, they're certainly entitled to be offended, but they're not entitled to decide that they're going to go to Paris and kill the people that created that cartoon. Many cartoonists had to flee their countries because they were brave enough to take on regimes or political figures.
Worker hopes that in these troubled times, people will appreciate cartoons for what they are.
I think the good kind of political cartooning is something that slips in a really good political point with a certain amount of good humor and wit that people will process and hopefully won't make them angry, but will make them think.
Julie Tabo, VOA News, Arlington, Virginia.
Okay. So that gave us a pretty good perspective of, of what a political cartoon is and the purpose of it. So a political cartoon is getting across the point of an argument or a political figure or a movement or a historical event, and it is going to be biased. And they use a few different skills to convince the reader to think about what that cartoon is trying to portray. So here are 5 different things to look for in a political cartoon. The first is symbolism. Are there items, images, people, slogans, which are symbolic of a bigger idea or a political or cultural event? 2, exaggeration. Hyperbolic images or captions to make a point. So maybe it is the picture of a president, but the president's features are drawn out of proportion. Or maybe in this case, on this video, there was a picture of Richard Nixon, and on his nose, I think it said Watergate, but it could have said something else. But he had this really long, drawn out nose like Pinocchio, the liar. And so you do need to know a little bit of background information to be able to catch those illusions. So if a president is drawn with this long Pinocchio nose, That's an allusion to Pinocchio, which is alluding to that the president is a liar about whatever was written on the nose, which in that case was Watergate. So the exaggerations will oftentimes include those allusions. Number 3 is labeling. Words which clearly clarify events in the cartoon. This is simple. It's just what words do you see on the page and what do those words mean? 4 is analogy. We have not really discussed analogy in class. It is a form of comparison, and the definition is on this page to help you. Analogy, comparison between two unlike things which contain a similar characteristic. A simile is not an analogy because a simile is short, it's basic, it's written down. An analogy can be visual, verbal, or an extended comparison. So it is this big picture comparison. Example, comparing the steps of the sinking Titanic to the steps of an economic crisis. 5 is irony, verbal or situational. We have discussed these types of irony. The one that's missing is dramatic. It wouldn't fit in with a political cartoon because there is no audience that knows more than what the characters do. I would need to rethink that statement because it's possible that you could debate me and I could be wrong on that. But verbal and situational are the ones you're going to see the most. So verbal meaning the opposite of what is said occurs, or situational, the opposite of what was supposed to happen is what ends up happening. So you're looking for these 5 things: symbolism, exaggeration, labeling, analogy, and irony to find the depth of a political cartoon. So let's practice. All right. So what I have over here on the side, I wrote the 5 different things that you're looking for in a political cartoon. Now let's just look at this picture together. I'm going to be quiet for a minute and I just want you to take in this picture. Okay. Now, this is one of those times where I really wish that we were together because you always notice more things than I do. But I think that this is going to be great for you to look at in terms of a political cartoon analysis. So let's just talk about what's happening in the picture in general before we look specifically at these 5 things. So back. So in this picture, it is a political cartoon of Earth Day where you celebrate the earth and when you're doing things to help protect the health and the longevity of the earth's natural resources. So on the top, you have a picture of an Earth Day event where everyone is celebrating Earth Day. There are huge crowds of people. There are boom boxes and a big stage and a lot of crowding, but the colors are really bright. It's really pretty. The sun is shining. And this is the before. You have a slogan that says, think globally. And then you have after. So this is after the Earth Day event. And what do we see here? We're missing all the people. Everything looks dirty. The weather has changed. It's now raining and just gross and yucky in the background. There's trash everywhere. Things have been abandoned, laying around. Let's see if there's anything underneath my face. The tents are still there. So this was not left in the best shape. And then the slogan continues because the slogan for Earth Day is think globally, act locally. Think globally, and then after, and act locally. So let's talk about these 5 steps on the left. The first is symbolism. Obviously, the big symbol being the earth, symbolizing Earth Day. You could say that the sun and the rain might symbolize global warming, where if we're not taking care of our planet and avoiding this type of destruction from big events, that we would be contributing to that. So we have the symbolisms of global warming, overcrowding, and Earth Day. Those are 3. You can probably stop there. 2, exaggeration. There are clearly a lot of exaggerations in these pictures. The idea that an Earth Day event would have been left this sloppily is unlikely. So just this cause and effect is in itself a pretty big exaggeration. The labeling itself in this case tells us a few things. The labeling tells us that it's celebrating Earth Day, and it also tells us the slogan, "Think globally," which is full of excitement and enthusiasm, and everyone's there and they're cheering it on. And it's good. It's easy to think globally. It's difficult to act locally. It's different to actually put those thoughts into action. You want world peace? What are you going to do in your own neighborhood to get it? And so what they have is this sarcasm in the labeling on the bottom. Yeah, and act locally. So you might want to talk about the sarcasm underneath the labeling, how the slogan was being mocked, being made fun of as satire in the labeling. The analogy on this cartoon is very easy to spot. They're not always this easy. Analogy, remember, is a comparison between 2 unlike things that have something in common. So the comparison here is very clearly the before and the after. So the analogy is comparing the 2 different ideas behind Earth Day, the think globally and the act locally, and how no one is actually doing the local action that it takes to think globally. You could also just say the analogy is in the before and after, and that obviously ties into the irony of this whole situation. So situational irony. You could say it's also verbal irony in the labeling here, think globally, act locally. That's sarcasm. But the situational irony in that they got together intending on making things better and really starting this thought process, this movement of creating a healthier planet. And then what they got at the end of the day was a planet where the weather had turned sour, probably because of overpopulation, overcrowding. And this is all exaggeration. And where the ruins were left and no one took care of the space. So you have situational irony in that an event which was supposed to be taking care of the planet ended up being an event which in fact shows us not doing that. So this was your first political cartoon analysis. And what I would ask you to do if we were together is, how do you respond to this? What do you think about this? What does this make you feel? Why do you think that they presented this cartoon this way? What kind of comments are they making about society? So really being able to look into all the different aspects of a political cartoon and read it can help you understand the rhetoric. Let's look at another one. We're going to go faster this time. Take a second and look at this cartoon. Okay. Symbolism. What we have that's happening in this is you have a soldier who is getting guns and supplies of some sort, and he's on the battlefield replenishing supplies in a war zone while evading the enemy. And here you have a stay-at-home person, maybe a stay-at-home mom, who is on a mission accomplished. She's wearing a mask. She's carrying all of these groceries. What kind of a war can we imagine that she is trying to, war being a symbolic war, that she is trying to evade? The coronavirus, right? Something that you are currently in. This is a current political cartoon. So the symbolism is in the idea of this being a war, this being a battlefield, and then you have the symbolism of a soldier on the left. Exaggeration, the exaggeration is in the idea that this is a war in general, and that she looks like she's ready to fight, and she's stocking up for who knows how long. So that is the exaggeration. The fact that we are viewing this as a war when in fact it's a pandemic. And pandemics happen. They don't happen often. Hopefully they will never happen to us again, but they could, and they happen. Back in Shakespeare's day, he wrote a lot about pandemics. Labeling. So how does the labeling help contribute to this? The labeling lets us know that this is a soldier going into the war while evading the enemy, being whoever the enemy army is, and that she is a soldier of sorts who's on a mission to evade the enemy, being coronavirus. So the labeling also contributes to the symbolism. Analogy, this is another example where it's a clear before and after. You don't always, or not a before and after, a clear kind of comparison between two unlike things. Going to war and going to the grocery store are two unlike things, but what they have in common is that there is an enemy, a symbolic enemy that they are trying to avoid. So the analogy there is pretty clear. The irony is probably the verbal irony in this case. The irony of the use of the word war and mission accomplished, and the fact that we as a society might be viewing this a little bit out of proportion. This is not me saying this, this is the cartoonist, might be blowing this a little bit out of proportion in the way that we are viewing this virus as a war enemy. And so that's the commentary that's being made. And so then I would ask you to respond to this cartoon. What are your thoughts, feelings, questions? Does it strike you to action or inaction? How does it resonate with you? I hope this is getting easier. And here's the last one that we're going to go over today. When I saw this one, I got so excited because hopefully you will know what's happening. You are going to need a little bit of background information from me. I have 2 cats. I don't have a million of them, but they are both on this table right now. That's Lucy, the little gray cat, little gray gato. And this is Ollie, the orange gato. And that's it. I have no more cats. I'm not a crazy cat lady. Just 2 cats and a baby and a husband. So this political cartoon I was so excited about. Let me tell you the background information. Who can we guess that this person is? Let's just use some clues. Look at his hairstyle, his clothes, his beard. Any guesses? That's right. It's William Shakespeare. So this is William Shakespeare, and he's all dazzled up for the coronavirus. So he is holding a skull that has a mask on it. I think they're called respirators, but I could be wrong. And he's wearing CDC. I want to say that's Center for Disease Control, but I could be wrong. And if I am, that's going to be embarrassing. But I think that that's what that stands for on his shirt. So they're doing a modern play on Shakespeare. And he's using some labeling that we're going to talk about in a minute in order to fully understand this political cartoon. So one, you have the symbolism, which is you have a great speaker of the past who is talking on something that is current. And he's also using some context from his play Hamlet to show that this is a matter of life or death. Exaggeration in the fact that the skull is wearing a mask, and he is using a Hamlet quote to talk about the coronavirus. And then obviously his physical features in itself are an exaggeration. Labeling. Labeling is the most important part in this political cartoon. So not all cartoons rely on labeling. This one needs it. So Shakespeare is quoting from Hamlet. In Hamlet, the play, you have the son, whose name is Hamlet, and he's leaning down and he's holding his father's skull in his hands. And he says, to be or not to be, that is the question. And he is wondering if he himself should continue to live or not. He's seen so much tragedy. He's struggling in all this drama that's going on in his own world. And he's holding his father's skull and he's wondering, like, do I want to exist anymore? And so the whole parody that's occurring here is that Shakespeare in this political cartoon is saying, should the general public be advised to wear or not to wear, he's talking about the mask. And so, as a member of the CDC, which you can see on his shirt here, he is commenting on, are these masks effective to save your life, or are they not? Should we say something to save lives, or should we not, because it doesn't save lives anyway? So this labeling is really striking at the parody of Hamlet, the life and death parody, and then also the dilemma that the CDC is going through with determining whether or not actually wearing these masks is that effective to help save your life and others' lives. And there's a lot that goes into that argument, which I encourage you to research. The analogy, the comparison that we have is Shakespeare, who dealt with plagues, the Black Death, on a really big level. And so Shakespeare, who walked through this on a deeper level, a much more deadly level, and our modern reader, you, who is now having to make these same decisions in the middle of this crisis. So you have the analogy of a past pandemic and a current pandemic, which is really great. So this analogy was not as easy to spot. You really need to look for them, but they're there. They are comparing things. 5 is the irony. There are all sorts of ironies in this one. I know that if you were with me in person, you'd help me find more. It's ironic that the CDC is having this internal debate on what's right for us to do and what's not. It's ironic that a mask of a person who is already dead, this skull wearing the mask, it's ironic that he is wearing a mask to save his life. It's ironic that we have someone who was a past member of society when the Black Death happened, who's now commenting on the current pandemic. So we see irony on all sorts of levels. I hope these 5 steps have helped you to understand how to read a political cartoon. And let's look at what your task is going to be for next time. Your day 1 lesson ends here. Your day 2 lesson, this is next time's task, will be posted on Tuesday at 7 p.m. and will be due Thursday at 7 p.m. We're not doing Reader's Workshop anymore, so most of your due dates are now going to be Thursday at 7 p.m. You will be analyzing a new political cartoon and writing your answers or responses to the cartoon. So I'm going to ask you those 5 things that you're looking for: the symbolism, exaggeration, labeling, analogy, and irony. And then I'm also going to ask you to respond to the cartoon, and I'll give you a couple different ways to do that. No written work is required for today's lesson. You just being here for this time counted, and that's all I have for you. Feel free to watch this again or to email me if you have any questions. All right, I will see you guys next time. I got to figure out how to pause it. Okay, bye.